Good afternoon and welcome to the program today here on WITY Radio. My name is Steve Cordell. I'm the minister for the East Park Church of Christ, the sponsor of the program. And I'd like to invite you, if you're watching on YouTube, to subscribe to our channel. Click on the subscribe bar. When the notification bell pops up, click on it. You'll be notified anytime we add content to the channel. And comment on these videos, like these videos, and share these videos. And if you're in the Danville area, I'd like to invite you to join us for our Sunday school. We have classes for all ages at 9:30 a.m. Sunday mornings, followed by our worship time at 10:30 a.m. at 1224 East Voorhees Street in Danville. Give us a call at 217-442-2386 if you have a question about something you hear on the program, or if you'd like us to address a Bible text or a topic, call us with it, or you can email it eastparkcfc@gmail.com. And joining me today on the program from his home in Austin, Texas, deep in the heart of Texas, is Rabbi Misha Ben David. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the questions that I have gotten over the years about Judaism as it relates to Christianity, and some other questions about the Jewish roots of Christianity. So how are you doing today, Rabbi?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself? It's pretty hot here.
Yeah, I heard you're going through some record heat down there.
Yeah, we are.
Which that says a lot for Texas. When
104 today.
Oh, wow. I heard the UK is really getting
yes, it's really bad over there.
Yeah. So a little bit about yourself. The audience kind of knows who I am and what I'm about. A little bit about yourself, where you're from. And
well, speaking of the UK, that's where I was born. I was born in Cambridge, which for those who care happens to be the hometown of Pink Floyd. Just like to mention that because that's something people can identify with sometimes.
Okay.
So, and that's where I initially went from, but I lived in Alaska for a long time, about 15 years, in two different stints. And I've moved around Texas quite a bit. Lived in Houston and Dallas before living in Austin. Also lived in Colorado and Oregon. So being a military kid, I've been moving around a lot.
Yeah, no.
My wife is in the semiconductor business, and she's moved around quite a bit too.
And she's from a military family as well.
She is. Her father was a helicopter pilot in the Army.
Uh-huh. Okay, and you when were you ordained as a rabbi?
I was ordained as a rabbi in September of 2012.
Okay, and that was out of New York, as I recall.
Out of Manhattan, yes, the Jewish Spiritual Leaders Institute.
Okay, and now this is going to be the cliffhanger that I had advertised for the show today. The one thing people are always surprised to find out about whenever we have these discussions is the fact that Misha and I are brothers. I'm the younger of the two.
I don't know which one of us is less likely to claim the other one, but
yeah, that kind of goes back and forth, I think. And we do get sometimes some interesting reactions when people find out.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I'm a Christian minister. He's a Jewish rabbi. And I remember when our mother passed away in 2013, that the minister who conducted her funeral mentioned you being a rabbi and me being a minister. And I do remember some weird looks that we got.
We did, yes.
At that, and we continue to get them. But what I wanted to do in this, because I've been preaching now since 1994 full time, and I get questions from time to time about Judaism, how it relates to Christianity. And a couple of the things that always seem to manage to come up is how do Jews today look at Jesus? How do they see him? Is he just some rebel rouser? Do they even believe he existed, or what's your take on him?
Well, there is no unanimity within Judaism as to the person of Jesus. There's a lot of different viewpoints. One of which is that he was just nuts. One of which is that he just lied. He just made stuff up. The most predominating opinion, and the one that I hold, is that we don't really know who he was or what he said based on what has been translated and presented to us in this century. We know there were a lot of people like Jesus that coexisted with him. People that claimed to be saviors and claimed to be the Moshiach, who was the Jewish Messiah. There were other people who did the same thing. Some of them survived the Romans, some of them didn't. But that's the personal view that I hold, was that we don't really know, we don't really have an accurate record of what he did and what he said, and if in fact he even existed. We just don't really know.
Okay. I have a clip here that I probably should have played this first. It's of Ben Shapiro. And for those who don't know who Ben Shapiro is, he is a conservative commentator. He's one of the founders of the Daily Wire, and he is an Orthodox Jew.
Yes.
And
I'm familiar with him. I am familiar with him.
Okay, yeah, and for the audience, he speaks on college campuses. He's young. I think he's in his early 30s right now. And he was at a Young Americans Foundation event, and I've forgotten where this is, but it is on a college campus. And here's a question that he got from a member of the audience. Whenever he's done with a Q&A or done with a presentation, he gives a Q&A. And I'm going to just play this clip here for just briefly for the audience so we can set this up. And then I'd like you to talk a little bit about what he says and see if that's anything close to what you would believe.
Hey Ben, I'm Will.
Okay.
I have a religious question for you. So I figure you've probably heard this before, but C.S. Lewis makes the argument that because of Jesus's exclusive claims that he is either a liar that intentionally led people astray, a lunatic that believed that he was the Son of God and he wasn't, or he's Lord. Would you put him in one of those categories, or would you put him in another separate category?
So, I mean, because I'm a Jew, I'm just going
Right.
to, I mean, look, I'm a Jew, so obviously for those who are not particularly versed in Judaism, the reason we're not Christians is because we don't believe that Jesus
Right.
was the Messiah or a physical iteration of God. Right? So the answer that is typically given here is there is a fourth option, which is the belief in Judaism that the Gospels are unverifiable and that they don't relate Jesus' own self-perception. So I've said this before, that it's not that Jesus was a liar or that he was a lunatic. It's that, in Judaism, we don't actually believe that a lot of the claims that Jesus makes in the Gospels jibe well with what Jews even at the time would have claimed, right? Which is actually the claim that Christianity makes. Christianity also makes makes the claim that Jesus is making transformative claims that would have existed outside of Judaism. So obviously, if you're a Jew and you see those claims made, you're like, well, no Jew would make that sort of claim. That's a weird claim to make. Christians are like, right, no Jew would have made that sort of claim because he's God. Right, so the option from within Judaism is to suggest that Jesus was actually a historical figure who was saying a lot of things that Jews would agree with, because if you read a lot of the New Testament, it, as you would expect, mimics a lot of the things in the Old Testament, and that he was actually a political figure, and that the Romans crucified him because he was a political figure who was attempting to lead a rebellion against their tyranny. That's the Jewish historical claim about Jesus. Now, again, I'm not saying that Christians agree with that claim. They don't. This is why I'm Jewish. This is why you're Christian. Nor am I saying that if you're a Christian, you shouldn't go to church. You absolutely 100% should. I'm trying to encourage more Christians to go back to church. I think that the future of the country is deeply reliant on the reinstitution of trust in the church as an institution.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, so what's your take on that there's this fourth option? That was something, because honestly, that was something I'd never considered.
I agree with that. I agree with what Shapiro says. As I said to you in the email, he and I are politically as far apart as we could possibly be, but I agree with him there. That the information presented in the Christian Bible simply can't be verified and can't be solidified in terms of its translation and its sourcing well enough to know if that was really what happened.
How do you see, or do you have any opinion or ideas about people like Josephus and some of the other non-Christian sources, or do you regard them at all?
No, really don't.
Okay.
I read some Josephus a long time ago, and I certainly understand what he was saying, and I respect his intellect, but I didn't put much stock in what I was reading.
Okay. What about now some of the claims? Now we both grew up in what I like to call a sort of Catholic environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. Now, by the time I came around, we weren't going to church a whole lot, except when Dad was in Vietnam. And so I look at it as I had a pretty clean slate when I started reading the Bible and studying it. So kind of getting to, how do Jews see some of the claims that Jesus made? Like, for instance, the claims to deity that are recorded. Do they see that as blasphemous, or do you see that just as something unverifiable like Shapiro was maintaining?
I'm with Shapiro on this. I mean, of course, anybody standing up and saying, using what's called the tetragrammaton, the statement "I am," which is translated as "I am who am," which is to say, I am the tetragrammaton. I am the great God Almighty.
Okay.
To say that would be blasphemous, and you'd be punished for that by the religious authorities of the time.
Okay.
The Romans didn't think much of it either, because they don't like anybody moving in on their power base, and another person coming along saying, "I'm God and I'm going to lead these people," is doing just that. And the Romans wouldn't have that.
Well, and that was going to lead to another question is, and this comes up a lot in Christian circles too, is the sort of political angle of it. Is in Judaism, do you see Jesus more as a political figure who was trying to maybe start a rebellion or some kind of insurrection against the Romans, or did the Romans just get involved because their hand was forced by Caiaphas and Ananias and some of the other Jewish leaders?
No, I think the Romans were acting out of Rome. I don't think they did anything that wasn't handed to them from Rome. I think their marching orders were to suppress any sort of rebellion, any sort of authority that might try to stand up against Rome, to suppress it, oppress it, kill it if necessary.
So a kind
They
of
were a
whatever
brutal regime, and that's what they were taught.
So kind of a whatever it takes mentality.
Pretty much, yeah. And of course, the Jews of the time, Caiaphas and his crew, the Essenes, and the people in charge, they obviously didn't think anything and much about a guy coming along saying, "I am who am." They're not going to go for that either.
Right.
But in a lot of white nationalist and white racist circles, it is pushed that the Jews were the ones that killed Christ, and the Jews, as you said, forced Rome's hand and all that stuff. Don't believe that for a second.
Okay.
The Jews were not happy, to be sure about that, but the Romans were the ones wielding the power. The Romans would have loved to have been able to say, "We didn't kill him; it wasn't our fault." So they may have rubbed off on the powers that be, the Jewish powers that be of the time.
Well, and at the time, the Roman authority were the only ones who could impose a death sentence. So they couldn't have legally carry a death sentence against Jesus or anybody unless somebody in the Roman hierarchy gave the go-ahead.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
And so that's always, even before I became a Christian, that was always a problem for me, to turn around and blame just the Jews and say, well, you're a bunch of Christ killers, because I always thought, wait a minute, Rome, you can't leave Rome out of the equation. They had a lot to do with it.
No, you can't. The Romans were solely responsible for the death of anybody who was crucified at that time.
Right. And if you look at it in terms of Christian theology, really we're all guilty of it, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So you can't just push it off on the Jews.
No.
So as Christianity began to spread, and this is the understanding that I have, is at first the Romans did consider them a part of Judaism, but over time the Jews said, no, wait a minute, those people don't have anything to do with us. Yeah,
the Jews were pretty much considered, Paul and his Damascus Road experience and all that. Those churches were all considered to be part of the Jewish community, just sort of an offshoot, sort of renegade offshoot, up until probably into the 2nd century. And they willingly and slowly separated themselves from Judaism because they realized they didn't have much in common with Judaism, and neither did Jews have much in common with them. So they separated themselves into a new faith. But it took a while, and it took a lot of work.
Well, it did. Now, and my understanding from history is that when Rome came in, and we'll take Judaism here in this case, they were perfectly fine with Judaism exercising whatever they did, religiously, as long as they didn't interfere with Roman administration. But once the Romans were occupying a given area, any new religion would be considered illegal. Hence, Christianity, once they could see that it wasn't Judaism or a part of
Yeah.
Judaism, that now is when the persecution from the Romans really started. That
Yeah.
it wasn't anything instigated by the Jews. I mean, the Jews, I think, did do some, but like what Nero did, which was really confined to Rome, and Vespasian and those others, didn't have anything to do with the Jews pushing him. It was, hey, you people started up after our occupation. You are therefore illegal.
That's pretty much true, I think. I think that's pretty much the case.
The problem was that somehow in all that, the blame got shifted to the Jews, which then leads to the bad relationships between Christianity and the Jews over the
Yeah,
centuries.
led to a lot of very bad things.
And I think a lot of it, in fairness, has to do with the Jews, or not the Jews, but the Christians, or professing Christians, let me put it that way, trying to call the Jews Christ killers and blame them for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I can see 100 ways from Sunday, or however many you want to look at, that's not true.
No, of course it's not true. It's scurrilous to even insinuate it. Because there were a bunch of people in the Christian Bible, of course, there were a bunch of people that gathered together and said, kill him, and we want Barabbas. You know, you want Christ or you want Barabbas? We want Barabbas. And you could say, well, that was the Jews. Well, sure it was. But that was also people that had blonde hair and green eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to blame people with green eyes and blonde hair?
Well, and that's one of the things when I'm teaching or preaching and I see a statement in the Bible that says, well, the Jews did so and so or did this. A lot of times I'll say the Jewish leaders, because I think there was some instigation among the Jewish leaders,
possible.
Not necessarily among the people themselves.
That's quite possible.
And so I think there is, yeah, well, contextual. I mean, it depends on the context.
Sure. Yeah.
I always say context is your friend. So you take a look and see what it says now. And I think that some of this years ago, and it's one of those articles I have lost because of assorted hard drive crashes. I read an article by someone who tried to deny that Jesus had any Jewish roots, and I can't remember all his arguments because it's been so long, and that really Christianity didn't stem from Judaism because Christ was the Son of God, and therefore he wasn't a Jew. But he was from the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
He came from. You can trace his lineage.
Yes.
So we do have those
the seed of David.
Exactly.
The seed of David.
Exactly. So we do have those roots that are there. So in this, I understand. As a Christian, of course, I want everybody to become a Christian, but I also here in America, we've got this little thing called the First Amendment, which says, you're free to practice what you want. And I'm free to practice what I want.
As of today.
Well, yeah. I mean, who knows down the road, and that, another discussion maybe for another time. But that is something that I have tried to, over the years, to emphasize to Christians that no, we are not. We have Christian principles in our laws, but people are free to pursue whatever religious background they want to.
Right. And as they should be.
Yeah. And when I look at Christianity and Judaism, I see a lot of these parallels that really we should be getting along better than what we are.
We really should. And I believe we should be getting along with Muslims better too.
Well, I think that's possible too.
Because we are all people of the book. That's in Muslim theology. We are all people of the book.
Yeah, and I don't know quite as much about that as I do about Judaism. And here again, I don't know that as much about Judaism. Hence the reason we're having this particular discussion. Now, I want to do a little turn here because another question that I get asked it regards the temple and sacrifices. Now, right now, there's no sect of Judaism that I know of that is doing animal sacrifices, and I get asked, do they still do sacrifices? And if not, why not?
Not that I'm aware of. There may be some strange splinter group in the middle of nowhere doing something like that. There may be some in Africa. There is a really strange group of African Jews which were completely separated from the rest of Judaism for 1,000 years, but yet they have the same practices. They speak the same language. They use the same Torah. They have the same liturgy and many of the same songs. We don't know how that happened. So, and they were, up until recently, they were sacrificing animals. Some of them may still be doing that.
Well, why does mainstream Judaism not do the sacrifices anymore?
Because the sacrifices were endemic strictly to the temple, and the temple doesn't exist.
Okay,
Without the temple, there is no sacrifices.
okay. So how do you how do they then take the Old
How to
Testament?
propitiate for sins? How do we?
Yeah, that's basically it.
That's kind of left up to that's kind of left up to rabbinical Judaism to explain.
Okay.
Rabbinic Judaism has been around since about 700 CE. You'd call it AD. We call it CE.
Yeah, common era.
Common era, yes.
Yeah.
And rabbinical Judaism basically says that we've evolved away from that.
Okay. So do they still have so then how do they view the concept of sin, or is there a concept of sin in Judaism still?
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
So
The concept of sin is pretty concrete and pretty specific.
okay. So if there is a sin committed, how does one go about atoning for that? I mean, as a Christian, I pray for forgiveness, confess the sin, pray for forgiveness, and then if I repent, and if I need to make amends to somebody, I make the amends. But what do you do in Judaism?
That's no different than what we do.
Okay. So basically, because we're removed from the time of the Old Testament, then Judaism doesn't see the need to make any kind of blood atonement or sacrifice.
We don't feel the need for what's called propitiation. We don't need that anymore. That's, as I said, we sort of evolved beyond that. We have the system of what are called mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are good deeds. And our mission has changed, and our method of resolving the question of sin has changed. Mitzvahs are good deeds, and good deeds make up for bad ones. And that's what we're taught to do, to make our life speak so that the goodness within us is greater than the sin within us. Which is a concept I realize it doesn't jive with Christianity at all. But
well, yeah, in Christianity, we would look at that as a works-based salvation. In other words, you're trying to earn it like you would earn a paycheck, basically.
Right.
So
and that doesn't fly.
Well, what doesn't? Oh, you mean the
works-based salvation concept doesn't work.
No, not in Christianity, no. But the thing I have found that's unique is that Christianity is one of the few that has that grace-oriented salvation as a gift, whereas Judaism, and my understanding of Islam, and it could be wrong, but my understanding of Islam is basically similar to Judaism in that regard. That
yes,
it's more of a work base. You do good deeds. If I lied to you, then I need to do some good deed to make up for that. As part of the repentance idea.
It is. That's correct. That's correct. We don't have the concept of propitiation, of blood atonement. We don't have that concept anymore.
Okay.
Because the temple doesn't exist primarily.
Okay.
And Christianity has a concept of vicarious atonement. One person can do it for everybody. We don't hold to that.
Okay. Now, you said you referred to rabbinical Judaism, and Ben Shapiro we referenced earlier as Orthodox. Where do you fit on that spectrum? Because one is more conservative, one's more liberal.
Very much so. Yes.
Spectrum within.
Yes, there is a spectrum. You're right. There is a spectrum, just like within Christianity. Unfortunately, we do have denominations.
Yeah.
A necessary evil, but we do have them. I am a universalist, which is an offshoot of Reform. We don't have a problem with Reform. We just take Reform a few steps further. Universalism is a very small group, and we basically believe it's up to you to figure out where you fit in the Jewish scheme. If you come to Judaism and say, I'm a Jew, or I want to be a Jew, it's up to you to figure out how you make that work.
So you could go conceivably down the what I would call the Shapiro road, where you're real conservative.
You certainly could.
Or you could go the other way and be a more liberal Reform.
You certainly could. I have no problem. Ben Shapiro and I are a long way apart politically, but I have no problem with his interpretation of Judaism at all.
Okay. Now, the other thing that some of the Christians whenever I talk about this difference between you and I, they're very fascinated by the idea of having to have a quorum of, what is it, 10 men to have
Minyan.
It's a what?
Minyan.
A minyan.
Minyan.
Okay.
Minyan.
They're
You
very.
have to have 10 observant men.
Oh, okay. Observant. Okay.
Yeah. Reform expands that to include women.
Okay.
Even a lot of conservative shuls will do the same thing. Conservatives may or may not include women in the minyan.
Now, that's in order to have a regular
Service.
Sabbath service, is you've got to have that 10.
You can have the service, but there's certain prayers you can't say.
Okay.
You can't say, like, there's a prayer called the Shema, which I wrote my paper about when I was in theology school. I had to write my graduation paper about the Shema, which is the most important prayer in the Jewish faith. You can't say that prayer if you don't have a minyan.
Okay. And the Shema is Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's the Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God.
That's correct. It's called the standing prayer.
Okay.
Because you stand for it.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the most sacred text in Judaism, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And that is one that Christians sometimes will recite, but it goes back to Deuteronomy and the Mosaic Law.
Correct.
So now, what about the high holy days and feasts and festivals? Now, like Passover is still pretty important to the Jews.
Very important.
I had a Christian friend years ago who got invited to a Passover, and she considered it a great honor, as I think she should have. But she said when she got there, it was interesting because it took several hours, and they would skip some of the prayers and some of the things because, well, this will take too long, so we'll skip this or we'll abbreviate this. Has Passover changed that much over the centuries that it's kind of a Reader's Digest or a condensed version nowadays? Or
I would question whoever was hosting that Seder. I would question them because when I host a Seder, and I've hosted Seders for lots of people, many of whom are not Jewish. I've had a lot of Christians here and even had a Mormon, and we've had a Christian Scientist here. And I abbreviate the service, but not because we're under time constraints, simply because we can't fulfill the law. There's a certain part that requires a child, and we don't have children very often.
Okay.
So we just skip that, not because I want to abbreviate anything, but because it without a child, it becomes pointless.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. If you don't have all the people to fill all the parts, that makes sense. Now, another one too that people find interesting is the setting of a place for Elijah.
Elijah. Let me explain something else before I move on to that.
Okay.
We have what's called the Haggadah. The Haggadah is the text for the Seder, and there are many, many, many Haggadahs. There are hundreds and hundreds of them that reflect different views and value systems and different interpretations of the way the Seder should be done. They all have certain elements in common, but beyond that, some of them can get very lengthy. An Orthodox Seder is going to take about 2 hours. A Reform Seder or a Seder like I do is going to take about 40 minutes.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is. My wife says, I don't think so. So, all right, 40 minutes to an hour.
Oh, she doesn't think you can do it in 40 minutes.
Probably not.
Well, we preachers we preachers and rabbis and teachers, we're paid to talk. So, that's what we get to do. So, yeah. So talk about the leaving a place for Elijah. That's always fascinated me.
Elijah is a very prominent figure in Judaism, probably second to Moses and Abraham, third to Moses and Abraham. And that's because he's the only Jew who didn't actually die.
Okay, yeah, the chariot.
He was swept up.
Yeah.
And because respecting Elijah is considered very important, somewhere, somebody along the line, nobody knows exactly who, it may have happened spontaneously, somebody said, the Seder is an essential event in the Jewish calendar, therefore Elijah should be part of it. And we can invite him. You know, you can open the door for him and invite him in, which we do. And you pour him a glass of wine, which is not touched by anybody. Nobody drinks it. You just throw it out at the end. And that's because Elijah is he's too important of a figure to ignore. It's basically what it boils down to. So he should be part of the Seder.
Does he figure into, well, two questions. One that raises to my mind is does he figure into any of the prophecies about a coming Messiah? And are Jews still looking for a Messiah to come? Since they didn't accept Christ as the Messiah, are you still looking for a Messiah to come? Is Elijah somehow figure into that? Or
that again depends on who you ask. I'm willing to bet if Ben Shapiro and I were sitting together, we would probably come up with two totally different definitions of who the Moshiach is and under what circumstance that the Moshiach will appear. Not because we have different interpretations, but simply because there's a lack of clarity about how he or she or they, and it could be any one of those. There's no reason it couldn't be a woman. No reason it couldn't be a group of people. It's based on it's results based. We'll know the Moshiach based on results, based on what he or she or they do. They will unite the Jewish people. They will bring peace to Israel and a few other things.
So when you say unite, are you talking a geographic uniting, like bring them all back to the Middle East, or more of a spiritual world wherever you are?
Even that's not clear. Even that's not clear. It's like Judge Warren said about pornography. I don't know what it is, but I know when I see it.
Okay.
To be a bit crude, if I may, the Moshiach is the same status. Don't really know. Can't really put a finger on exactly what that individual is going to do, but when it happens, we'll know. It'll be clear. It won't be ambiguous.
So then I guess you would say that some of what Christ and the claims he made were ambiguous then, and not where you could nail them down to really say, yes, he is the Messiah?
Not ambiguous. I don't think he was ambiguous. But he didn't fit the description of the Moshiach.
And that kind of goes back to what Shapiro said. Both Jews and Christians say he didn't fit what they were looking for in the first century.
That's right.
But we're saying it for different reasons. We're coming at the same.
Right. We arrived at different reasons. Yes.
Yeah. We arrived at the same conclusion on that, but we took different roads to get there.
That's true.
Well, we're just about out of time here. I got about a minute left here. If I'm looking at my time here. Anything else you would like to add that we haven't covered that might be, you think, of importance or of interest to?
I want to support something that Mr. Shapiro said, and I think is important. He says he thinks Christians should go to church, and I agree. I think Jews should go to shul, and I think Christians should go to church. I think if you have a faith, you should take a deep dive into it. Don't be passive about it.
Well, and I would agree with that. It gets frustrating to me when I hear people say that, well, I'm X, Y, or Z religiously. And I say, okay, well, are you involved? Do you go to church? No, I haven't been to church since I was 12. Or I haven't been to shul. I haven't been to whatever. But yet they'll claim it and they'll dig their heels in that, I was born a Baptist. I was born a Catholic. I was born a Jew. I'm going to die that way. But you never practice it. And I would say the same thing is, if you claim a faith, practice it.
What they're telling you when they say that is when the mud hits the fan, that's what I'm going to be. When, you know, when trouble comes, I'm going to all of a sudden be a Baptist or a Jew or whatever I grew up as.
Yeah,
Because I don't know what else. Because I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, and I also have found some of our family members would use that as a means of telling the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses to get lost. You know, I'm a Catholic or I'm a whatever, and they would do
Which
that.
is perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, that would be. Well, I appreciate you joining us for this and answering.
Well, I'm happy to do it. Let's do it again.
Questions. Yeah, we might, because there's some more here too, that 30 minutes goes by pretty quick.
Yes, it does.
I've never had a problem filling up the time on this program, but I appreciate you joining. We might just do this again.
We should
sometime. And for the listening audience, if you do have any questions about what you heard on the program today, send them to us, and I'll forward them on to Misha. eastparkcfc@gmail.com is our email, or you can phone us 217-442-2386. Thank you for joining us. And that's going to conclude our program for today. And remember to subscribe if you're watching the YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and click on the notification bell. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope everybody has a blessed week.